Hello everyone, and welcome to the next panel session of the day. This is the first one focusing on higher education, and we've got another one to follow after. There's a handout for the audience which you can download. You click on the download section and you can find out a bit more. A few bits of information about the live session before we get underway. There's a chat panel located on the right hand side of the GRIP platform. Please feel free to ask us any questions and our moderator will get back to you. We'll also do our best to pass these on to panellists. And please note that because they're moderated, there might be a slight delay in your question showing. We'll do our best to get through them all. If we don't manage to, then don't worry, we are saving the system and we'll get back to you after the event. So after the successes of the student panel yesterday, we thought we'd do another one today, but this time from the perspective of older students. This session looks at pandemic's impact on students, online learning, transition to universities and career choices. I'm so pleased to introduce you to the chair of this session, Fiona McKenzie, Head of Carfax Education, UAE. Thank you, Fiona, and over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much indeed. It's great to be joining you all today. The panel is joining you from multiple locations across the globe, and they will introduce themselves shortly and tell you where they're calling in from. But I think one of the really interesting things we're going to talk about today is obviously that the current pandemic has had a massive impact across all generations across the world. But I think one of the generations that has been most adversely affected by this, particularly in terms of education, has been our student population. So that's the students, ranging from GCSEs upwards to those transitioning through to university, as well as the younger students. And we're very lucky to have a mum with us today who has been homeschooling her children, who are at that younger range of the age group. So we've got a very diverse range of perspectives for you today, and I'm looking forward to introducing you to the panelists. So can we start? Carl, would you mind starting by introducing yourself?
Yeah, hello. So my name's Carl. I'm the principal of Carfax College and the head of our tutoring team globally. I'm based in our college in Oxford, in central Oxford.
Gemma, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I am a parent of two young children. I've got a 6-year-old and a nearly 8-year-old, and I'm in the UK. So we've been, battling our second lockdown.
Yes, that's a challenge. Duco.
Hi, I'm Duco. I'm in the UAE right now. I'm 16 years old and I'm taking my GCSEs at Cranleigh, Abu Dhabi.
Thank you. Pavani.
Hi, sorry, there seems to be some delay, so I'm sorry if I'm late. But my name is Pavani. I'm based in Dubai. I study in Repton School, and I'm currently in IB2.
And Vaishnav.
Hi everyone, my name is Vaishnav. I am nearing the end of my second year of a degree in European politics at King's College London. I have been back in Dubai for the last year and I've been learning online for the last year. It's very nice to be here.
Thank you. Well, thank you all very much for joining us today. I think we'll all agree that this has been a year of highs and lows. But I thought let's start by focusing on the highs. So Vaishnav, can we start with you? What would you say was one of the positives that you've gained from your experience this year?
I think that there have been a lot of new avenues that have been opened up to me, and I found that I have a lot more time on my hands to pursue things that I normally wouldn't have. So, for example, there is this competition known as the Undergraduate of the Year Awards, which is an annual competition for undergraduate university students from across the whole of the UK, and you can nominate yourself for different categories. The issue that I had was that there was no category that was related to politics or any of the social sciences, but I did find one called the Future CFO of the Year Award, which was something that I found interesting. But as I progressed through the different stages of the competition, I realized that every single other candidate was from a background that was very different to mine. They were all from either a finance, math, or accounting-based degree. And I felt that initially, at least, that may have held me back a bit. But because the competition had to go online this year, the stages were all much further apart. So rather than ending in April and the prize giving ceremony happening in April as it normally would have, this was postponed all the way to September, which meant there was a lot more time between the different levels of the competition, which gave me a lot more time to do some background research on finance and accounting and sort of really level the playing field. And because of that, I was able to then reach the sort of top 10 finalists for the competition. And I think that's just testament to all the new opportunities that were opened up to me because things moved online.
Brilliant. Thank you, Vaishnav. So that's an interesting perspective. New opportunities, more time to kind of explore those. Pavani, what would you say would be the kind of highs of this year? What have you gained from the experience? Pavani? No, we seem to have a bit of a delay. Oh, here we go.
Well, I think because of, online learning, especially during the time of lockdown, there was less. Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So because of online learning, during the lockdown, there was less contact, face-to-face contact naturally with the teachers and the students, and even with, your friends and your peers. So I think we gained a lot of independent, learning skills, which we might not have been exposed to had we been in school. Obviously, from a young age, you're taught to work independently, but this put us in an entirely new position that I think, especially for students in IB1 and IB2, has, trained us well for university, where things will be different to school, where we will have to be a lot more independent, than we can imagine. So I think some of the skills that we learned and the way we managed our learning, and just we have to be very creative, we have to be independent, and I think that's really going to carry forward into university in the next year or two, depending on whether you're in IB1 or IB2, whether university is online or it's in person. So I think that was definitely something that was very important in our journey.
Brilliant. So yeah, so your takeaway is more independent learning and sort of approaching it more creatively. Duco, how have you found it with your GCSE studies?
I also think that obviously because everything more has been online and more has been from the same area, it's given me also a lot more time, and it's allowed me, because we kind of have to travel less and you're all in one space and you can kind of keep on working, it's really allowed me to kind of create a steady schedule, and that really works every day because you can kind of schedule in the times that you want to do everything, and it really helps with, say, for example, if you want to work on fitnesses, if you want to make sure you revise for this exam, or you want to do this, so it really helps with your kind of mental health, and it helps with everything else. It kind of helps create a big balance across, and I think that's really helped me achieve everything, because it's allowed me to then again slot in revision time for my GCSEs and for the mocks that we had in February, because after we heard that the GCSEs were going to be cancelled.
Okay, so you feel it's given you more kind of opportunity to control your own time and kind of set your own structure. Okay, brilliant. Gemma, what about your perspective as a mum? What would you say was the kind of one of the nice things to come out of this year for you?
I think for me, it's really being a bit more involved in the children's learning. So when they're at school, you don't really see what they're doing or how they're doing or their progression that they're making, and spending a bit more quality time with them. Don't always get the opportunity when you get them at the worst points of the day, when you're rushing to get out the door and when they're tired and grumpy and they come home.
Yeah, so that's also more kind of quality time with the children. Carl, what would you say would be the kind of one of the positives you would take away as a sort of education provider this year?
I think, this past year, we've seen a huge increase in investment in EdTech, and I think that's been obviously fueled by the need for remote learning, but also fueled by parents being a little bit more open to remote learning. So I think this kind of increased flexibility in the way we learn is quite an interesting outcome of the pandemic, and I think will be interesting even post-pandemic.
Yes, and in a sense that's interesting because all of the students have touched on that this kind of flexibility that this new way of learning has given them. So we focused on the kind of highs and the positives, but I think we can't gloss over the fact that there have been some significant challenges this year as well. Carl, what would you say on the flip side have been the challenges of delivering education this year?
I think for us, it's although remote learning has been quite successful for some students have actually realised it is a great way for them to learn that they never would have thought of before. But one of the challenges has been that it isn't for everyone. And we at the college work with students of all academic abilities, and one group that we work with are students with special educational needs. And that for some of them has been fantastic, especially for ones who've struggled with actually coming into school. Remote learning's worked really well. For others, it's been a challenge to teach them without that personal contact. That was actually what they needed. So that has been a big challenge for us, as well as the tech side of the problem, especially in the UK. Not everyone has the tech required, and not everyone has a stable internet connection is something we discovered very quickly. So that's been a bit of a challenge for us.
Gemma, I can see you nodding there. Would you agree with some of the points Carl's been making from a parental perspective?
Yeah, so we definitely had tech issues. We moved house right in the middle of this pandemic and then had no internet for 2 weeks. So trying to stream lessons on 4G with various phones and devices. We only had one iPad, so when the children are both having lessons at the same time, it just became quite challenging. Yeah, and also having two children on very different levels and programs meant you're constantly switching between the two, and they're not quite old enough to do it independently. It's definitely a challenge. Yeah,
and it must have been quite challenging too, I think, when you're homeschooling your children in that kind of very intense sense of that switching between being a mum and being a teacher and kind of getting those two roles.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they don't respond to you like they would respond to you as a teacher previously. Your children do not respond to you like children in a classroom do.
No, because of course you've got experience of being in the classroom, you know how it can, but not with your own kids. Absolutely. So Vaishnav, now let's kind of come back to you. What would you say have been the biggest challenges? Obviously you found some positives in this, but what's been the challenge? Because you've done a year now of remote learning.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this challenge is something that I've discussed with a lot of my close friend group as well in university, which is the knowing how you can switch off from just, being productive all day or just working or studying for school or whatever it is. And I was relatively lucky in this regard because I'm staying at home with my parents, so I can still interact with my family on a daily basis. But I know for a fact that many of my friends as well who were initially in university accommodation when the first lockdown hit, they were forced to stay within the same four walls, and they were forced to use the same screen for, for those of them who have part-time jobs, for working and work meetings, for studying for university, for socializing and just relaxing with friends, for watching movies, everything, it's all the same environment. And therefore the lines tend to get blurred a lot between, relaxation and actual working and actual studying. And so it's very difficult to strike that delicate work-life balance ordinarily itself. And this just became harder. But also from a strictly just international student at university point of view, I also think that access to resources in general sometimes becomes a bit of an issue for me, especially because I'm studying a relatively niche degree in European politics. It's sometimes proved hard initially to find enough resources to work on my essays and everything, because based in Dubai, although you have a lot of libraries and you have extensive resources, because European politics is not necessarily something that's very popular here, it might have been a little bit more difficult initially, but now I like to think that I've learned to adapt to it.
Okay, so your challenges really have kind of centered around resources and just getting that work-life balance, right? Duco, when we were speaking the other day, I think you were saying the same sort of thing, that kind of work-life balance, but also socialization.
Yeah, I also think that because of the entire being in the same area, being in the same time, and although it's helped with create a more steady and balanced schedule, it had made socialization a lot harder because seeing people through video calls is just not the same as seeing them in person. Maybe in school when you're walking through the corridors, or even just seeing them outside of school, it's just really not kind of the same environment. And it's also, I feel that because we've been in this kind of process and doing work and doing everything alone so often, it can also get kind of dangerously consistent and dangerously simple, not having to rely on anyone else and not having to rely on any other's decisions, which can kind of allow you to like lock yourself off from people, which really is not nice because you want to be able to expand and obviously meet new people and see new perspectives. I think that's definitely been hard trying to balance that.
Yeah, and sort of, as you say, that kind of withdrawal from socialization, it can make reintegration quite challenging, I think. Pavani, you have also, of course, been dealing with a huge uncertainty over exams. How have you kind of found that sort of challenge?
So I think it has been quite scary because initially with, I think, online learning, everyone struggled to connect with the learning itself, because there isn't that face-to-face contact with the teachers. You don't get those little breaks with your friends. It's just, you have one lesson. And like Vaishnav said, we struggle to find that balance. So, when we thought about the upcoming exams, it was or it was, it was a big stress factor that, have we really, learned enough? Have we connected enough to do these exams? And then the factor of whether the exams will happen or not also, was pretty stressful. Now we found that the IB exams are going ahead, so our preparation is more streamlined. But initially, it was quite scary because you had two different issues to juggle with. Are you connecting enough with your learning? Are we even going to have exams? What part of your learning do you need to give, I guess, priority to if we do end up having the exams? So I think that was quite a struggle, really. But now we have exams. We know they're going to go ahead. So that's where our preparation is at.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of clarity, and I think it is that uncertainty, isn't it, that can be very kind of debilitating. And sort of thinking about uncertainty, I think, one of the things that we really want to explore with you today is what impact do you feel that this is going to have on sort of potential progression plans? I mean, Vaishnav, obviously you're at the stage now when you are looking ahead to your kind of future career or maybe further study, and this kind of disruption to your education may have an impact on that. What's your kind of view on that?
I think that it hasn't necessarily changed my career progression plan too much. If anything, it's obviously opened up a couple of avenues with sort of competition and everything. So I've been able to understand different career choices and everything. But in general, my plan entering undergraduate university has always been undergrad, then post-graduation, and then move on to a career. And if anything, that's just been cemented further by the end, coming to what seems to be nearing the end of this pandemic, because in the last year, just spending so much time away from university, I've realized that I'm not ready to just give up on my university experience as of yet. By the end of these 3 years, I would have hopefully only spent 2 years on campus learning at university, and I don't want my entire university experience to be defined by just those 2 years. So that's obviously not one of the main reasons or the most important reasons, but in terms of the way the pandemic has affected it, I just think it cemented my progression plans in that particular sense. Definitely going for a post-graduation after this.
Yeah, which will position you well, I think, because obviously by that stage, by the time you've done an additional year or two, hopefully the graduate market will be picking up again. Pavani, of course, this is really directly impacting on you as well, in the sense that you've made all your university applications this year. How do you kind of feel about that? With obviously you've talked about the uncertainty with exams, but now this kind of next progression stage.
So I think traditionally when, children my age, when we're looking for universities, we often plan that we'll go on campus, we'll get to look around, we'll see the research facilities, we might meet some of the professors face to face, get a real idea of what the university is like, what the atmosphere is like. And obviously this year that was not possible. So many of us had to rely on virtual tours or, just rely on what the websites of the universities had to offer, which also causes a lot of discomfort in a way, because you're not having that experience, in real life. It's all virtual, it's all online, and it's something that you would rather experience being there. And it's a big decision to make, choosing the university you want to attend. That's the next 3-4 years of your life, So it was a big decision, but I think, touch wood, most of the universities, particularly the UK ones, did a very good job of organizing the virtual tours, and they were very informative and they were very well rounded. So personally, while I did miss out on the experience of going to the actual universities, I don't think I was lacking in, any sort of information about my course or about the research facilities or the options abroad. So it was, I think they made up for it in that sense.
Okay, but as you say, it's, normally you would have had the opportunity to actually visit and sort of, so you're going to pick a university without having actually been there, relying on the information you've received online. Okay, which is, as you say, most people's experience. Duco, I think you've had a similar experience, because obviously you're progressing on this year from moving on from Cranleigh, Abu Dhabi to a school in the UK. Do you want to just talk us a little bit through your journey?
Yeah. I think I also had quite a similar journey in that sense to Pavani, is because I'm obviously now in year 11 taking my GCSEs, and the next 2 years I was planning on going to sixth form to study my last 2 years, study IB, which I've planned now and picked the school now in the UK. And I also had to pick between different schools and kind of fast through the websites. And I didn't also have that experience in person to go to the actual school which what you would usually expect. And then once you get there, you can obviously feel the atmosphere. You can see how the people are like. And usually you have that kind of click, and that really quickly kind of sifts through some other schools because you don't have that click and you don't think, okay, I don't think I would fit in here. And I don't really like these small things. But now you've had to really dive deep into the websites. And in that sense, all the schools have done really well because all the schools that I applied to had really, really detailed websites, and they had all the kind of subjects that I wanted to take, and it really allowed you to see the courses and see everything. So in that sense, it did make it a bit easier, but it also made you extremely, extremely precise and really kind of critical, because even the smallest things on the websites, like tiny, tiny things, maybe even a spelling mistake or these things, made you kind of question the professionality and or how good the school was, which if you were just walking around and speaking to someone that was showing you around the school and they stumble on their words, you wouldn't even have a second to think about, oh, maybe this means something. So that's definitely really impacted my choice. But I think I've obviously made some good school choices, and I'm happy with where I'm at now.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely, you've had to very much rely on kind of word of mouth as well as the kind of online. I think that's a very interesting point that you've all made about, you know, obviously the schools and the universities have had to pivot to kind of provide all of this information online. So Carl, I mean, how's that reflected for you? Because obviously you're recruiting students online. Have you found that, you know, how have you managed that?
Yeah, I think we found we do have quite a unique perspective on the teaching side of Carfax, because we see all the problems with delivering a homeschooling program through the school and switching what is traditionally face-to-face to online. But also through the tutoring that we do, we often get students who come to us who are struggling with their homeschooling program. So we directly get their input as to what extra support that they need. What we've found is that actually a lot of students have really enjoyed the independence of homeschooling or remote learning. It's given them a little bit more control over their education, a little bit more ownership of their education. Of course, it's not worked for everyone, but I think personalization of programs and education is kind of key to Carfax's mission in education and what we're really trying to achieve. And I think, you know, for us going forwards, what's been really interesting here is seeing parents, you know, expand, kind of open their mind to options available, but also education providers, you know, expanding what options are available. And I think if we are to personalize or individualize education, that comes with a variety of options. So I think for us, for Carfax, and what we're planning to do going forwards would be to capitalize on that a little bit by offering more options, seeing what we've learned from remote learning and how this might cater to different groups of students. And I mean, it's great to see the impact that Carfax has on the students in the locations that we have offices, but by expanding and coming up with a really great online program, we can also impact students in more remote locations that we might not have ever been able to open an office. So I think in terms of our progression, that's what we're looking at, and that's what I find exciting post-pandemic, I think.
That actually very neatly brings us to a question we've had from the audience here, which is saying, you know, have you actually preferred online learning? Gemma, they were very interested to hear from you as a parent. You know, have you preferred the online learning for your children?
I have to say for my two's age bracket, so 6 and nearly 8, the online learning has been particularly challenging. My eldest is an extremely lively boy, and trying to get him to sit and engage with a screen that's not playing games is quite hard. So for him, I feel like, and actually my girl, at that sort of age bracket, they need maybe a bit more interaction in a classroom, the more physical side. They're getting up and moving around and rearranging shapes, which obviously I do with them, but as the teacher, their teachers who are on the other side of a screen find that a lot harder when they have, you know, up to 30 children who they're trying to engage. So for me, I feel like the online learning has been very challenging for my two, but I can see that as the children get more independent and a little bit older, that actually they would really enjoy that individuality and independence of being able to get on with it by themselves.
Mm-hmm. And we'll go on and ask the other students about that in a moment, but just your children, obviously, Gemma, are now back in school. How did they cope with that kind of reintegration?
Well, my two are quite, I'm from a military family, so we are quite used to moving. They actually hadn't gone to the school that they've been doing their online learning with. So for them, they've just gone back into a brand new school, having only interacted online, and they've both absolutely loved it. They really thrive on interaction with other children in a classroom. So they've been absolutely over the moon to be back in a classroom. I'm very happy and content.
It's very interesting, certainly from kind of I think our perspective as sort of professional educators. We've all realised that schools are so much more than just about education. It's so much of it is about that community. I mean, Duco, how would you say? Have you preferred online learning, or were you pleased to get back into the classroom? Duco, are you there? Oh, we seem to have a bit of a delay there. Pavani, what about you? Obviously, you had a period of being outside of the classroom and then back in again. I think you only had a term out. How did you find that? Which would you prefer? Did you prefer the online, or did you prefer being back in school?
I could not do online. I don't think online was for me, because personally, I feel like it really took away from the holistic school experience of being able to connect with your friends, being able to connect with your teachers. Because, between lessons, even those 5 minutes in the corridor, having a chat with your friend, or, just your teachers towards the end of the lesson, sometimes you might stay back, discuss your concerns, and the same just wasn't possible online. You often had to, contact them through emails or Teams, and there was a lot of pressure on the teachers as well, because a lot of them were teaching many different year groups. So I think online just wasn't for me. I really like being back in school, even though it is a bit different with the, COVID-19 restrictions in place, like we're not doing team sports and everything. It's just nice to be able to see actual faces every day, to be able to run down the corridor, ask your teacher a quick question, and then that anxiety and that stress of being in those same four walls without any, I guess, help from the right subject teachers is taken away. And I just think that we have all realized, especially considering this is my last year of school, how important it is to be in, and I don't think any of us will ever complain about having to come to school. So yeah.
Vaishnav, what about you in terms of university? I mean, have you found, obviously you said it's given you more time and things, but how have you found, because you had your first year there, and now obviously, how would you compare the two experiences?
I think I'd have to agree with Pavani on the whole that I would much rather prefer to be, in face-to-face learning. I mean, online learning definitely is not without its pluses. Like I've already mentioned, there are definitely many good things to come out of it. And I definitely know that my parents appreciate having me back home for some more time. But I do think that there are some inherent parts of the education experience at schools, at universities, that you definitely miss out on when you're online learning. Just even if it's just that basic interaction, like Harvey mentioned, with fellow peers or with professors and everything. And I'm just starting to realize how much I really miss that, just those 5 minutes of just chatting with friends outside of lecture halls before or after the lecture actually begins. All those things are definitely some parts of your experience, of your education experience, that are ingrained into university life. And it's definitely not something that I would compromise on just to continue learning online after this pandemic is over.
Would you say that your kind of experience this year, have you managed to kind of keep up with doing societies and sort of the sort of extracurricular things of university, or has that all gone sort of very much on hold?
No, I actually have been able to keep up with a lot of my normal extracurriculars. In fact, I've actually been able to expand a little bit more, simply because of more accessibility to different opportunities that I normally might not have been able to take on. Definitely because of time zone differences and everything, it might not be exactly the schedule that I'm used to. And I've definitely been forced to adapt and become a little bit more flexible in that regard. But I do think that apart from that, because so many opportunities are going remote or going online, and even if it's internships or just extracurricular activities in school itself, there are things that I've been able to explore which are completely new to me, and it's just widened my horizons a lot more. So in that sense, yeah, it has been a pretty good experience.
Yeah, which is really interesting. Duco, what about you? I mean, obviously you've been back in school now for a term or so. If you could choose between doing online and in person, where would your preferences lie?
For me, I think that, sorry, my connection is also slightly unstable.
Don't worry, we can hear you.
Had my preferences with, I've had my preferences with online learning, but also have my preferences with in-person learning. Routine and everything is very simple, but it's just not, again, had that connection with the teacher. Sent through an email that if the teacher hasn't had the time to check that email, maybe, then you're in.
Yeah, we are having a bit of an issue, I think, with your.
Really small differences.
I think we are having a bit of an issue there with your connection, Duco. There's a little bit of a lag. You might want to kind of log back in again, if that's okay. We've got another question here, which is saying, how have the circumstances of the last year made you rethink your future career choices? Obviously, Gemma, not quite so relevant for your children at this stage just now. But Pavani, what about you? I mean, you're off to study psychology. Do you think that this experience will influence your choices going forward? Definitely got a delay there as well. Yeah.
I don't think it's influenced my career choices so much as what I look for in a university, for example. I don't think that a lot of us. Oh, sorry. I don't think that a lot of us, appreciate how important it is for the university to take into account the students' mental health, especially because this pandemic has, definitely affected everyone's mental state in some way or the other, as well as simple things such as, some universities dealt with the quarantine period a lot better than others. Like they offered meals, the children had proper accommodation and everything. So I think it's a really small things that many of us might not have considered before, but this pandemic has forced us to consider. And I think it's got more to do with the well-being of us as students as opposed to the courses themselves. And of course, but that is also an important, part of the thing. For example, with me for psychology, a lot of it will be very research-based. So it's important for me to know that, we will have access to the labs despite these restrictions. Will the class sizes maybe be reduced? Would that, influence our learning? And that's all very dependent on the course in the university itself. So I think it's made us rethink more of what we expect from the universities as opposed to our career choices.
Mm-hmm. Although interestingly, given what you've just said about mental health, Pavani, your choice as to study psychology is actually going to be deeply relevant going forward. Yeah. Vaishnav, I mean, I think we've touched briefly with you on the fact that it's opened up new opportunities for you, the kind of pandemic, and it has perhaps potentially made you rethink a little bit about your future career because you've explored the kind of CFO route. Have you got anything else you'd want to add about how you may view your future now based on these experiences?
Definitely. So apart from just opening up, a whole new avenue in terms of a career path than what I was normally expecting to do, which is, the law and diplomacy road, I think that it's just made my approach and my outlook to different undertakings a lot braver, I guess, in a certain sense. I think it's just helped me understand that there are a lot more things that I could ideally undertake, and I don't necessarily have to worry about maybe not having the traditional background that people may have had previously to actually go down that path. The perfect example is obviously the CFO thing, where you don't necessarily now need someone to definitely come from a finance background, but just in general as well, I think that's something that can be generalized and applied to everything that I normally undertake. And it's just given me a whole new outlook on many of the things that I take on, and that I can easily adapt to those situations, and I've gained those transferable skills.
That's interesting. So yes, you think that kind of flexibility has just really opened up your mind to lots of other things and made you feel more confident about areas that you might not have considered before. Yeah, that's very interesting. Carl, from your kind of perspective as an education provider and the students that you work with, have you seen any of them kind of change their perspective and look at different avenues that perhaps they might have previously considered?
Yeah, I think because we've all increased our use of webinars and attending webinars and We've had many people contact us from all sorts of different industry that want to get in front of the children in a webinar type setting and tell them a bit more about the working world. I think for a lot of students, they've started to either consider a little bit earlier than they would have, where do they want to go with their education and what do they want to do, and consider options they might not previously have thought of. One opportunity springs to mind in that we had a construction company come in and do a webinar for all the children, and we asked all the A-level students to attend, and a few of them actually came back and said, maybe I should be an engineer, and they'd never really considered that in the past. And I think it's just widened everyone's horizons. I think everyone's looking at more, and it's really got students and families to look at what education means again, and what its real purpose is. I mean, I'll be interested to see how many people turn to routes like apprenticeships and things like that as a result of having deeply looked at what they actually want to do with their education, because education's been such a focus this year during the pandemic.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So how do you feel kind of widen people's options? I do think, certainly talking to schools around the world, they've all commented on how they've been able to access people that they would never have been able to reach before, to bring in and connect them with the children, which has in that online environment given them a much kind of broader reach, which has actually been quite exciting in some ways. I think before we kind of wrap up, I'd just love to ask all of you, what would you say is the thing that you are most proud of achieving in the last 12 months, despite the kind of circumstances and the challenges that you've all faced, both educationally and in other circumstances? So Duco, let's try with you and see if your connection's back again. What would you say is the thing that you're most proud of achieving in the last year?
Yeah, sorry for the slight interruption of the connectivity. But yeah, I would definitely say that for me, obviously, it's being accepted into 4 of the top UK boarding schools for the 6th form. And that's really allowed me to kind of choose between the ones that I want the most. And it's filtered between, if I obviously see my advantages and disadvantages between the IB and the A level. And it's really allowed me to kind of dig deep and see which one I really think fits me in my sporting, which I really enjoy, as well as the academics and as well as things that I really enjoy. So having those opportunities and being able to pick one of the schools I loved was really one of my significant achievements, definitely after all the exams and the rigorous interviews, etc. So that was definitely one of my all-time highs this year.
Yes, I have to say, given that although you're not actually going to sit your GCSEs, you went through so many assessments earlier on this year, I feel like you almost have done your GCSEs, but it's certainly has got you where you wanted to go, which is fantastic. Pavani, what would you say was your kind of, the most significant achievement you feel you've made this year?
Again, sorry, there was a delay because I can hear overlapping sounds. So sorry if I'm late to that. But for me, I think it will probably be all the university offers that I've received alongside the Repton student platform that I set up as head girl with the rest of the head. So basically, we set this up because we, after talking to our peers once we went into lockdown, and even the ones from the younger year groups, we found that people were getting very overwhelmed because everywhere you saw, the news and newspapers, social media, it was all COVID-19 this, COVID-19 that, and I think it became very overwhelming, especially when you were, stuck in your house with no other form of interaction. You only keep hearing the same gloomy news about how it's only getting worse. And of course, while it's important to be educated on that, I think people needed to hear, things from a different perspective regarding other things happening in the world. So we set up the Repton student platform as a way to allow students to hear from their peers, whether it's about, whether it's a personal op-ed or it's about something that's relevant globally. And interestingly, I don't think this would have happened if we were in school, but through this online journey, we managed to expand the Repton student platform into the RSP debate team, into the RSP community, RSP podcast with the IB1 students. And this gave us a chance to interact with the year group below us, even though we weren't in school. And once we did start school again in person in September, these little communities that we made from that platform were able to take it one step further. So the RSP debate team has been doing inter-school debates online, and I think it was just really interesting to see what started off as a way to help students stay connected slowly became smaller little teams that allowed students to explore their strengths all across the school, and led by the IB1 students, which gave them a chance to step into our shoes once they then applied for head students. So it became a nice legacy.
Yes, and it sounds a wonderful thing to have set up. And actually, listening to you talk about it, not only has it obviously been a huge benefit to the community, but the transferable skills that you will have acquired from doing something like that will be something that will stand you in very good stead. And Vaishnav, you've already shared with us a little bit about the CFO competition, but I think there was a follow-on from that, wasn't there, in terms of achievements?
Yeah, so obviously the CFO thing is one of my major achievements over the last year, but also the things that came off the back of that. So one of the main examples is recently I was approached via my university by a journalist for the Times who wanted to interview me for a feature, a special report that he was writing for the Times, which is a leading newspaper in the UK. And he wanted to know my views and opinions on what exactly the future looks like for CFOs. And it was very interesting to discuss and share much of what I've already talked about in this discussion itself, actually, about how you're seeing a rise of people and candidates coming in from very non-traditional backgrounds to actually pursue these career paths. And it's not just in terms of CFOs, you're also seeing this in other careers and fields, like even for law, you see a lot of lawyers and people working in law firms in the UK who don't necessarily come from the traditional law degree background. And I think it was just an awesome opportunity to be able to discuss all of this and just deal with what the future looks like for different career paths for such a sort of well-read and well-established national newspaper.
Fantastic. No, a major achievement. Congratulations. Gemma, what about you? I mean, it's obviously been a bumpy year and you've moved house and moved to the school. What would you say has been your kind of big achievement this for you, your significance kind of gain?
I think maybe my biggest achievement is getting through the last year with all of our sanity and well-being intact. My husband did a 10-month deployment last year, and we've moved house, and we've had several lockdowns and small children to navigate. So I feel quite proud of still being here, sane at the end of it.
I absolutely agree. I think that is absolutely, unparalleled in parenting kind of terms. I think everybody's had that challenge, and you've just been amazing. Congratulations on getting through. Carl, what about you? What would you say has been the kind of significant achievement for you and perhaps the college this year?
Well, I think maybe even perhaps not just the college, the whole Carfax team have been really fantastic at using the variety of tools available and really thinking outside the box in how to keep students engaged during this time. There have been obvious challenges with remote learning, and I think the whole team has done a really fantastic job of making sure that students are not falling behind, keeping them engaged, and using it as an opportunity to try and give them some ownership over their own education and make them really engage with their learning, not just with the subject, but with what education is and what it means to them. And I think we're planning to funnel all of this experience and what we've learned over the past year into our own remote and online offering that could be used in conjunction with in-person aspects, because as everyone has said, school is much more than just the education. It's much more than just the syllabus and the curriculum. And I think we just need to expand the tools that we use if we're to personalize education.
Yes, so in a sense, it's opened up new opportunities for that kind of re-engagement with learning. And I think that would probably reflect everybody's experience this year. And that's a really great note to end on, that actually, for all the challenges of this year, actually everybody seems to come out of this, certainly all of you guys on the panel today very positively about this, with your reflections on education, the impact that these challenges have had, but also the positives that have been gained from this, and where that will take you all in the future. So thank you very much for sharing your reflections on this year.
Great, thank you so much. That was amazing. Well done with coping with the various technical difficulties. It was so fascinating to get such a range of opinions and insights from around the globe. To the audience, you'll be redirected to a short survey once we end the webinar, so please tell us what you thought. We'd love to hear from you. We're also on social media during the event, so if you want to connect with us there, follow us at Guess Education on Twitter and use a hashtag #GuessGlobal. We've also been asked a few times about the videos. They will be posted on the platform after the live sessions. We need to upload and download them. And also next week we'll be posting them on our website, guesseducation.com. A massive thank you again to our panel and Fiona for chairing so brilliantly. If you enjoyed it, then we've got a panel session coming up in about 15 minutes from our platinum sponsor Microsoft, focusing on distance learning impact on higher education. I hope you enjoyed the event. Thank you and bye from us.